Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the Professor, Greg Dooley, and the Pundit, Steve Clark. Men, take the mic.
That's right, it's the Professor and the Pundit with Greg Dooley and Steve Clark, and we're proudly presented by Nick Hopwood, who's a certified financial planner, founder, and president of Peak Wealth Management. Retire with confidence. Greg, some 40 episodes ago, we started a podcast, and it was previewing the 2023 Michigan football season, and I thought Michigan had a chance as anyone to win the Big Ten, but they were dreaming for a whole lot more, and I can't believe I'm saying it. We're talking about a national champion today.
Steve and I just got back, and for me, it's still sinking in. Did this really happen? I woke up today. How about you? Has it fully sunk in? Like, what's going on right now? Because we've seen a lot, and we've talked about what we've seen on this show for decades now of Michigan football. Lived through it. A lot of pain in there. How are you feeling today about this? Do you have it all together? Are you good? Are you like reconciling all this or what?
I feel invincible.
Yeah, unstoppable.
I just feel like no matter what's going on, there's been a lot of angst and anxiety for all the reasons that we've talked about. We don't have to talk a whole lot about that today. Yeah. Let's just enjoy it and relish it. But it's just like, it just feels like it doesn't matter what the trolls are saying anymore. Michigan just went out and shut everybody up and did it in such a way, Greg. You first beat Penn State at their place and not knowing you even had a coach that was going to be coaching until an hour from game time, and they basically said, you got to go to your assistant head coach. They won that game in Happy Valley, a top 10 team. They had a nail-biter with probably one of the better offenses in the Big Ten in Maryland, gave them a scare. Then you've got Ohio State, number 2 in the nation. You got Iowa with perhaps the best defense in the nation. They're ranked. Then it's Alabama, who one guy told us that the playoff committee said they have a Michigan problem, and they've sent us meaning Alabama, to solve it, okay? Michigan beats them in overtime, and then you have to beat the number 2 team in the country again to wrap things up. What other team, and I haven't looked it up yet, but what other team has gone through that kind of gauntlet since the 1st of November to win a national title? I'm sure every team's had to play maybe 3, but 5?
Think about all the different styles and weapons that we had to face too. Like all the talented people in those 6 teams you mentioned, I think it was. And I throw Maryland into that too. Like, there's a reason they gave us trouble. It's remarkable, Steve. I can't believe it.
Well, Taulia's like the second best quarterback in the Big Ten. And they had a variety of weapons on the offense. And you're right. In ways, it's a lot like the basketball tournament. You know, you have a Thursday-Saturday matchup, and you've got a high-flying, 130 points a game style. And then on Saturday, you're preparing for a team that slows everything down and maybe only scores 50 points per game. Or a team that pressures you, like a Shaka Smart team, back in the day would used to pressure, and you have to maybe only have 40 hours in advance to be able to figure this out. And Michigan was kind of going through that, especially when you've got, Ohio State, Washington, and Alabama throwing the different styles at you.
Yeah, and especially with the way the schedule fell, with New Year's Day falling on the Monday, and they wanted to do the national championship the next week. Normally there's a little more time. Now, I don't know that we had a choice, like an actual choice not to go to these games. We got, Steve, I know you have the radio show, but if you didn't want to go or maybe didn't want to spend the money, you could probably make other arrangements. Same here, but we felt compelled to go, and the whirlwind that we just went on for spending the time in LA, getting home. I got home a little later, spending a couple of days at home, and then packing my bags and up to
all
Houston.
Over again.
Yeah, it's wild. And you talked about the journey, and you talked about those 6 games, and you talked about our 36 plus episodes in. And I got to say, we got to thank these listeners here, Steve, because to me, it took it to a new level for us to do this podcast, and all the love we got and the people we ran into Houston. And I ran into Nick himself in Houston, Nick Hopwood, and to see him there, it was extra special that we did this and the support he did. And by the way, I ran into the guys from Autograph who have been great supporters of ours, and there's a link to the Autograph app where you can get great Michigan content. I saw those guys, and I have not taken off. I still haven't, by the way, as a demonstration of how this is still sinking in for me. I got my Michigan versus everybody wristband on that those guys gave me. I have not taken it off since they gave it to me. In the shower, yes, it's clean, it's fine. Okay, and by the way, I was on campus today. Classes started again this week, and I just saw so many smiles on students' faces. And I was rocking the Block M hat, which I normally don't do on campus. It's kind of understood, but rocked it on campus. Got to see a bunch of students, a bunch of my former students. I got more Go Blues in the hallways of the School of Education that I've gotten. I saw kids coming in and looking at the daily newsstand to see if the printed edition was out. I saw kids like giving it. It didn't look like it was yet, or either that or they were all taken. I'm still coming to grips with it all. I really am.
Well,
I really am.
Everybody's fired up on day one of class.
Oh yeah. Well, without a doubt. And of course, there's been talk about the greatest this, the greatest that. Is this the best team ever? Where does the number 2 jersey as a jersey now stack up in the great jerseys, the number 1 jersey and these iconic things? Blake Corum as a running back in that great list. And there's probably a show, maybe it's next show, Steve, but I led my class. I always do my class now with a cold open, like Saturday Night Live. I don't even introduce myself. Before I introduce myself to my students and talk about the mechanics of the class on day one, I do a cold open where I break right into something. Today, in the history of college athletics, I broke into a discussion of the greatest Michigan football team of all time, and is this team that team? And did a very, very brief discussion of what's the criteria the class was involved, what makes a great team, and then kind of stepped through the greatest teams from what I consider the 5 eras of Michigan football history, and stepped through and had that discussion.
Well, take a few minutes and summarize that. Give us the Cliff Notes version of it.
So the students so right off the bat, I'm challenging the students in the class. I haven't even said, "Hi, I'm Professor Dooley." And I said, well, how do we judge this? There's different eras. We've been doing this. This is the 144th team. How do we judge teams? The people said championships, rankings, adversity, schedule, opponents, comparative. Did we play the best teams? All these things came up. I said, absolutely. All true. So I picked the best teams I described the 5 eras, and really the first era with a coach where there's a legitimate contender, and our first national champion is Fielding H. Yost. We picked 1901, and we went into 1901. Michigan was unbeaten, unscored upon, 550 points to 0, concluding in a postseason game in the first Rose Bowl. And so that there were all the accolades there. They have a legacy. They have a nickname, the point a minute. Mm-hmm. The coach has a nickname. Buildings, all this stuff. Rose Bowl victory. Rose Bowl wasn't a championship. Rose Bowl was against a team that had lost a game to California. Wasn't even the league champion. And that team never played a team from the East, Harvard, Yale, Penn, which were considered, like the SEC, the elite teams. We fast forwarded to 1947, Fritz Kreisler, the Mad Magicians. Showed him a clip of the great Mad Magicians and the just dazzling display of shifting and ball concealment and passes and double throwback passes and all the stuff they did to revolutionize the game. And they have a nickname. And the season concluded in the Rose Bowl. It's a split national title with Notre Dame. Notre Dame was undefeated. They didn't get to play them. Right? There was a second AP vote after the season for the first time. They made history, but they split the national title with Notre Dame. Then we go to 1997, and we know there. And I showed some clips, and we talked about it. Again, concluding in the Rose Bowl, beat a great Washington State team, but never got to play the other team that was undefeated and had the chance. We walked through this season. 5 of the last 6 games against ranked opponents. 2 number 2 teams, if I call correctly. I think Iowa was number 12. Where was Penn State? They were right around the top 10.
Top 10?
Yep. Ohio State being that first number 2 team. And then, of course, Alabama, number 4?
Number 4.
Physically dominant. We won every trophy that is available for us to win. From the Big Ten to all our rivalry trophies now sit in Michigan's trophy case. The Rose Bowl, once again, the iconic team had to go through the Rose Bowl, dethrone the SEC champion, who's now looking for a new head coach, by the way, and on to that conclusion with the last undefeated team in a gauntlet. How can you not say they're not the best? And this is the guy who loves the Yost era, and I didn't even mention the 30s because I don't think they're in the same category where Harry Kipke won 2 more championships. They were fantastic teams, but they never even played in a postseason game. So you put all that together, this is absolutely the most accomplished team in history. There's no question there. And you have to argue that it's the greatest season. Is it the greatest era? That's a different discussion. I know you got into that a little bit with Sam Webb. These 3-year stretch in our lifetime, though, is absolutely the best in my opinion.
So, I mean, how far back do you go? I mean, what I don't know that maybe you do is 47 and 48, which is 2, but I don't know the years surrounding the periphery of 46 and 49. But this 3-year stretch of finishing in the top 4, culminating with a championship, it has to be within most people's lifetimes, not even an argument, that it is the best era.
Coming out of what was probably the low point since, Rich Rod?
The whole 15-year stretch, quite frankly, between the end of Lloyd Carr and the ascension here that started in 2021, technically that's 13 years.
Yeah.
That's pretty low. These
Short
years
of the Sugar Bowl.
Years they didn't make bowl games. One major New Year's Six, the Sugar Bowl you mentioned, in 2011, Brady Hoke's first year, wasn't exactly the most dominating game, but Michigan won it. The thing about this year's team, my gosh, you've got 4 top 10 wins, 3 top 5 wins, and they've won it. Now, did they do what Georgia did and steamroll everybody by 30, 40, 50 points, or like fielding Yost's point-a-minute teams? No, they didn't do that. But the gauntlet of the schedule and the adversity that they face along the way, and everybody rooting for them to lose. I mean, to me, this team, I think, is going to be defined by their focus through adversity, okay? A 3-year rebuild culminating in the year 3 national championship. They were top 4 the other 2 previous years, but you just saw this kind of run happening like a professional team. You know, first win the division, then get to the Super Bowl, then win the Super Bowl.
Yes.
And they were relentless. They were driven for this year. It's a total team bonding.
Absolutely. The other thing I told the students was, you are so lucky. So lucky. You are a part of this. These players are your classmates. In fact, there are football players who I spoke to in the class. You will tell people the rest of your life. Some of you will have children. You will tell your children that you were here when this happened. And you are so fortunate to be able to say that.
And the fact that some of these people listening to this will look back and say the best of the Michigan years in my lifetime were at least 25 years ago, if not 45 years ago, maybe 35 years ago. And you tell this to your children who just kind of nod their head and move on. It's nothing what they've experienced. It's not even come something close. And within 3 years, they can look right back at you now and say, what we're doing right now is better than all of what you taught me about since I was a kid growing up. Within 3 years, they went from hearing you talk about stories from yesteryear, like it's ancient history, the Civil War or something.
Yeah.
And now they can share in the moment. I was there when Michigan played its best.
Yes. And you can draw these comparisons. It's very hard, these lines, and maybe we'll get into more of that around player legacies and moments and all that. But just incredible. It's definitely sinking in. But I felt obligated. In fact, Steve, I feel so obligated. My other 2 classes are the NIL class and my leadership class. But they all know I teach the history of college athletics. Mm-hmm. I feel obligated to do a similar version. I haven't met with those students yet when I see those folks and give that to them. Because I know many of them, I think, want to hear it. So I'm geeked. The students are geeked. They don't know this or feel this. Maybe no one does. Maybe it goes back to Harbaugh's staring up at the confetti coming down and going, there's 1,000 different stories of the confetti. We look at all this stuff differently, and it's a very, very personal and emotional thing. That's why we do a podcast. That's why Steve and I love this stuff so much, and I assume everyone listening, it's personal for all of us. That's the way I look at rivalries and these big moments, because it's all very personal. There's family, there's emotion related, but it's definitely different from the students. But I know I'll never forget. And here's another thing, and I'll tell you this, Steve. Before the Rose Bowl, I was thinking about it, and I got this class, and I got these, by the way, over 125 students. My history class is now waitlisted as well, as long as my other classes.
Good man.
And we're going to do a assignment or a project that's going to be related to capturing their maybe favorite moment, memory, incident, either at game, outside the game, related to this team and its run while they were a student here at Michigan, and capture that probably on our digitally or something like that, and give that to the Bentley Historic Library as kind of a time capsule, as one of my assignments in my class. I haven't quite crafted how I want. I reached out to them already to talk about it. Kind of like they used to create students used to create scrapbooks, and this is really hot in like 1910 and 1920. And the Bentley Library actually has a collection of the old student scrapbooks, which really give a picture, because there really wasn't much else, of what student life was. Well, I want to tie it to the football team and its run, and maybe get all kinds of different slices of the student experience captured and make it part of the historical record.
Oh,
and
that's great.
I think it'd be a cool project.
I think it is a cool project.
So I'm still spitballing on it, but yeah, I'm going to take advantage of this too.
Greg Dooley's time capsule.
Did I see some of my students on the field, by the way? Yes, I did. There were a few hugs with some of my former students who are football players. I saw them down there when we went down there. One student told me, Steve, on the field, that he goes, "Hey, Professor Dooley."
Did he say he loved you?
No. I think I told Herb I loved him. Is that all right? I think I mean it. One of my students said, "Hey, Professor, I'm not going to be in class on Thursday. I got to go home." I go, "Go be with your family, man. You can miss one day of class, you'll be fine." So, excused. So
very nice.
Yeah. So
that's very nice of you. Now, I have to ask you this as you were talking. This question has come to mind: the Rose Bowl experience or the national championship experience?
It's not even close.
Okay. Which one was it for you?
Oh, I'll take the Rose Bowl every time, because so here's what occurred to me, and it kind of put this in perspective. And I was a little anxious before the game. I don't know about you, but I was a little anxious. Like, boy, I came out here. I feel like we should win this game. I just don't want a bad call. Michigan stuff, a timeout. Chris Webber, yes, I was there. I've been through all this, so I'm like, okay, just not that. May the better team win. Right? Just not that. Just not the timeout. Just not a bad call. Just not a phantom fumble. Please, give me that. And as I was settling into the game and into pregame, and I saw some of our friends, I saw the Bankowskis, by the way, are great listeners, our friends, and the Weintraub's Irish family, and some other people. Right? It's Nick Hopwood, I already mentioned that. It occurred to me that the vibe was very much like the Big Ten championship game. What do I mean by that? Pro stadium, kind of pro feel, right?
Dome.
But very, very much kind of an NFL vibe. But the vibe of the fan base was incredibly confident. It was more close to a coronation than, hey, we got a tough game. Okay, that's what I felt. And when I felt that, it reminded me of the Big Ten championship, where we kind of felt really good about how things were going to go. That's the vibe I got there. And that's a good vibe, Steve. But the Rose Bowl, the mountains, my trips out there, dreaming of going back. Maybe it's because I spent more time in L.A. It's more of a college vibe, and it was way more intense. And the pregame, you did not have that confidence in everybody that we were going to win this game. We felt pretty good, but we didn't know what was going to happen. If you ask people, would it shock them if Alabama maybe beat us by 18, 20 points? I don't think anyone would have been shocked, incredibly disappointed. but not after what we've been through. The Rose Bowl is king. And that's why, to me, it was so important we won that game. And I stand by. Had things gone the wrong way in the national championship game, you just can't take that away. And you can't take away that moment. You can't take away me petting Herbie's dog Ben on the field rolling around, which I have a picture now. But that's, for me, that's what it is. It's still, the Rose Bowl's the best. It was obviously a different feeling because when all the chips were on the table, we still had to lay our hand down and win the last one, and we sure did. So what about you?
Well, Screamin' A. Smith had talked about all the games need to be out of Pasadena and played at SoFi.
Oh,
clearly he does not understand. He does not understand.
No.
So, as we documented last week, my first trip, took my son. There was obviously some advantages there where that would come into play. But there's no doubt, I've just grown up for 50-plus years about the pinnacle used to being the Rose Bowl, the last game, falling short, winning a few, what it all meant. Michigan's last national championship came from winning at the Rose Bowl, as you already reminded people. When you include all that stuff in there, beating Bama and potentially a dynasty, all that being said, we are in agreement. I thought you might say winning the national championship and the coronation was the best, but we're actually in agreement that the most satisfying thing was being on the field after Michigan winning the Rose Bowl and the way that game played out. The confidence level in Michigan was just as equal for the people at the University of Washington. I talked to their media, I talked to their fans, and they seemed to be just as confident that they were going to beat Michigan. They were glad they were playing Michigan. In fact, I said, why are you glad you're playing Michigan? He says, well, it's not really, and this is more than a few people. This was a lot of people. They had come to an agreement that they did not want to see an SEC team because they just thought that the SEC in general is just better. And they were happy to play anybody but Alabama.
I understand
anybody but Georgia.
We're all scared. We're all a little, like we can say this now. We're a little afraid of the SEC. We were. I'm not anymore. Not with this team, I'm not. I'm really not.
Yeah, I mean, Alabama, look, there's still being arguments being made. And quite frankly, until Michigan plays every single team in college, until there's a 133 game regular season, not everybody's going to be convinced.
Okay, if you're talking about Georgia, I understand that. It's the only thing really you could say is what about Georgia? Okay, but they
didn't play their way in.
They just had a way to get straight in. Obviously, they would have been in. They were number one. They lost to the team we beat. What do you want us to do? It was de facto a tournament.
Not a September, January thing. It was
right.
The last two games. Alabama hadn't played a game since beating Georgia.
By the way, in the state of Georgia, am I correct?
Yes.
Yes.
What
do you want? It's funny you say that. Like, if you're looking back, I'd probably shuffle around my top four, but obviously different styles make these fights, and I think different teams would have had different success. But it's really, really hard to ignore Michigan's defense. Especially, you had a chance to watch the game?
I've watched the first and fourth quarters over again.
Yeah, but it just translates to any of these different styles when you have a great defense. And obviously, with a high-powered passing attack, it translated. And I just feel like bring on Georgia. But looking back, the toughest teams that Michigan played, absolutely Alabama. I'd put Ohio State in that category. Probably Georgia would have been tough. Penn State was fantastic, on defense at least, right, Steve? So if I had to make a top four or a playoff where the toughest gauntlet for Michigan would be right now, I would include Alabama and I would include Ohio State in there. I think those were really tough matchups. Remember, we played Ohio State at home. They had the ball at the end with a chance coming down the field. And I feel like that Washington game, that could have gotten really ugly had a couple things gone the other way. I know Washington had their chances, but I did look at the film. I watched the 60, the Big Ten and 60. I didn't realize this watching in the stadium, how many times, while we didn't get Penix on his back that much, I didn't realize how many times we hit him, nicked him, popped him, grabbed him right after he threw the ball, or he got rid of it so quick to avoid the sack. I kind of knew he was fidgeting and throwing it quickly. You could definitely see that. But I'm following the ball. I didn't realize how many times he got drilled.
his rib injury at the end was really showing to the point that he was throwing the ball away to avoid being hit after the throw, like a knockdown is typically registered.
One of his legs looked like it was hit on the interception in the second half, and I don't know if that happened before. And players kept coming by and kind of doing the run and the nudge, and he was really like cringing and looking away from it when they were getting. I saw Kenneth Grant one time got right in on him, and one of the offensive linemen tried to get
shoved him.
Yeah, Kenneth Grant's no, and he barely hit him, but they didn't want him to get touched, and he didn't want to get touched. That's what caused a lot of those passes, right? And I know a lot of you watch this on TV. You're like, yeah, Dooley. I didn't realize it when I was watching the stadium, and looking back, Michigan dominated that game. And
speaking of your viewing angles, we have to talk about how we watched the game and where it was from. So initially, we find out when we go in that we're located in the auxiliary press box. Now, the auxiliary press box at the Rose Bowl is outside the Rose Bowl in a tent. So when I found out there was an auxiliary tent for the Rose Bowl.
Auxiliary anything. I'm thinking cinder blocks or a tent or a
mobile truck.
Temporary stands, movable.
Horrible. Sightlines. Yeah.
Yes, go ahead. So I saw the same thing.
We're going into this auxiliary deal, and I kind of looked at it, and I said, okay, this isn't so bad. And essentially we were behind the end zone, which all of us in broadcasting like because we're fully appreciating the full 22, the coach's view. So when you see holes open up like Donovan Edwards went through, like Blake Corum went through in the first quarter, you see the hole. Okay, it's massive. You see how coverage breakdowns happen in the moment, all these good things that TV does not show. But the other thing is in the press box, you're usually sealed off.
So let me tell you.
Go.
Yeah. So you're usually sealed off with glass. And this press box in particular was beautiful. Okay. And by the way, if anyone's listening, you can get us in trouble. No. We're very grateful to be in any press box, in any seat, and all that stuff. It was 800 level, and my seat was in the main press box behind the glass. And behind this glass, and it's very sterile. There's no cheering. It's a professional environment, as you might say.
The sound is muffled.
Sound is muffled. They have, in fact, press boxes have typically someone like basically calling the numbers and the plays like Will Johnson on the tackle, that kind of thing. Someone's calling it for just the press, right? There's a guy who does it at Michigan Stadium because it's so quiet and you can't hear the PA announcer and things like that or really pick it up clearly. Very sterile. So I find out, Steve, that where are you guys doing the radio show? Oh, we're in the auxiliary press box. And, of course, my mind goes to that picture of what this piece of crap auxiliary thing is. And it's not connected to the main press box, which is huge. Well, I got to go see Steve, and I got to go see Sam and Ira. But I got to go all the way down, and I got to go up, find another elevator, and get over to this auxiliary press box. I walk in there. It's just as big, if not bigger, than the regular press box. And as Steve points out, it's open air. So I go down to where they are. And I see the Michigan fans coming in with their pom-poms right. I mean, you can't touch them. There's a couple of desks in a row and a small aisle between us. We were in the Michigan section.
Yes.
So what did I do? I looked around. I said, Steve, are these seats back here open? Absolutely. No one's sitting there. I went right back to the regular press box and grabbed my bag. No, I'm sure no one minds. It was all media credentialed people. And I plopped down right with you guys. It was great.
I was so glad that you did because we got to celebrate the highs and lows together. I just want you to imagine, for those that have been in Michigan Stadium, imagine the Jack Roth Stadium Club on the visitors' sidelines. Take the windows out, but there is seating. Take the windows out, but you still have the long hallways and the places where you can get beverages and high boy tops to congregate and meet with people.
Easy access to bathrooms, by the way.
Exactly. Food was fantastic there, by the way, as every place that we go to. It's wonderful. You felt like you were part of the atmosphere.
Absolutely.
Instead of being muffled behind the soundproof glass. Crazy, between the three of us, there was a fourth guy there who appeared to be somewhat of a Michigan fan. He was wearing red. And he was celebrating every touchdown with us, and we felt like we could celebrate every touchdown considering the circumstances that we were in.
Yeah, and by the way, we weren't elbow to elbow with all kinds of people covering Washington or ESPN or Pete Thamel or all these people. No. We were spread out, and it looked like there were just people hanging out. There were clearly Michigan fans with us. I didn't know some of the guys, including this guy who was in all red.
He told me in the tunnel afterwards, because we all went down to the elevator together. Ira Weintraub was sitting in the stands with his family in the low 100s. So if this was a movie, we had this other guy replacing Ira because he was in the group hug when Michigan kind of got the clinching touchdown. He joined us down the elevators, and he just revealed to me that he was a GA for Nebraska. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, in 1997. I'm like, what?
I don't know if he had something against Washington, but I know he loved the style and the size and the tenacity. We substituted Kenneth Grant a couple of times for somebody else, maybe but who's the other guy? I think it's number 99 or what? Anyway.
Cam Good.
Yeah, with Cam Good. And this guy, he screams at the top of his lung, that guy's as big as the guy they just took out, that kind of thing. And that's what, when we could, we were cycling our linemen through.
It didn't seem like he knew Michigan on a personal level or a week-to-week basis or who the roster was made up of. But his buddy was a Washington guy. Maybe he was showing up as the second wheel for this guy who was going up to the game. But the Washington guy, he was a fan too, and he was kind of quiet. But Washington fans were very nice all throughout. They were confident, but they were very respectful, and they were very nice.
I get why they were confident. I mean, they had overcome so much, and we talked about this, to be 10-point underdogs to Oregon and really take it to them. And I do think Penix was he seemed to me to be the best player in college football, and I haven't seen much of the LSU guys, so I got to say. But They really seemed like to be a special team, and I wonder if they felt like they were a team of destiny.
Well, they did feel like they were a team. Alabama thought they were a team of destiny. I talked to Washington fans. They said the words, "we're a team of destiny." And part of this is they had played in 10 straight games that were decided by 10 points or less, and some of them got down to the nitty-gritty mid to late fourth quarter, and they pulled it out. And they pulled it out every single time. They didn't stumble. You look at how Michigan kind of built their roster. Michael Penix started it last year by surprising everyone in Huskyville that he was coming back for a 6th year. And when he did that, the star receivers that also could have gone pro decided, we're coming back. Odunze, Polk, McMillan. They said, no, we're coming back for another year too. Then it was the offensive lineman. It was like building the Fab Five. Juwan Howard starts, and then all of a sudden Jimmy King and Ray Jackson, and then Jalen and Chris. You just see this domino effect of all the different players offensively and their best ones defensively all returning because Michael Penix wanted to return.
Yep.
And he was their unquestionable leader. Yeah, they're stunned that they didn't win. And knowing that both teams felt like they were teams of destiny, one was going to win and one was going to lose, I wasn't exactly sure which one it was going to be. I thought Michigan was going to win the game, but would I have bet the house on it? Absolutely not.
Yeah, no, and I thought we had a chance against Georgia because we were having a great season. And I thought we obviously were going to beat TCU. But I thought we had a shot against Georgia. But no, looking back, we didn't have a shot against Georgia. And I think a reasonable Washington fan at this point would go, they were probably sorry, but they were probably fortunate to keep it a 7-point game. I mean, their defense played way better than I thought it would. Once after they had those breakdowns and Donovan did his thing. But they just didn't have the depth. They couldn't sustain it. They kept it close, but they were fortunate, in my opinion, to keep it that close.
I think talking to a few people, including Coach Neuheisel, who I rode the bus back with to the hotel, they just said, man, it was there for the taking. They just didn't get it done. I think Alabama is probably saying it was there for the taking.
Oh, absolutely.
But we made some mistakes, and I think that's where some people are coming up to say, hey, if it was Georgia, they would have beaten Michigan both times or beat Alabama or beat Yeah, take the worst parts of all of them, and maybe Georgia could have. But, Michigan didn't play its best games either and still found a way to win, and they created some of those issues against Alabama, against Ohio State, and against Washington.
Yeah.
So it was fantastic.
By the way, can I say
yeah.
real quick? So you mentioned Neuheisel, and we played the clip of him, how much he loved Mr. Brightside. So the fans got to vote on a song to play in the stadium, that kind of thing where you do the fan vote.
Yeah.
And they played Don't Stop Believin' by
Journey.
So I was listening to Full Ride the day after the game. The part he loved, he echoed again the Michigan fans. When they came to the part of Born and Raised in South Detroit, he couldn't believe how loud it was, and he loved it. So I
think
thought
he's got a new respect for Michigan fans.
he does, but he was full on board and just laughing with every team. We talked about being a team of destiny. This was different. Like, it was Michigan versus everybody. It really was.
Yes,
I know
it was.
other people have that mantra. Like, Ohio says that. No. But this season, it was really Michigan versus everybody. To do what they did, he really leaned into it, and how much Michigan fans really enjoyed that and really needed it. And by the way, I don't know what you've heard. It was at least 60% Michigan, probably 2/3. Clearly, and by the way, from the 700 level, Steve and I we could see every seat and how it wrapped around, and it was clearly a Michigan
for a Michigan crowd that is a reputation of being quiet. They were decisively louder than their Washington counterpart.
Yeah.
Decisively. Even when Washington was doing well.
And some of you are watching it on TV, and all of the action, all the touchdowns, most of it happened in the Michigan painted end zone. Well, this game, it happened in the other end zone, in the Washington end zone. And that's also where, the Washington, I believe the band, where they kind of wrapped around.
Yes, the Washington band was behind where most of the scoring was.
So if you looked at the TV in those angles, you might think, wow, it was pretty even. It was not. It was not even. It was Michigan. So well done. I hope many of you were there and able to experience it. Look forward to hearing your experiences from it. Steve, what's next?
That means it's halftime here on The Professor and the Pundit with Greg Dooley and Steve Clark, and we've been very thankful to have Nick Hopwood as a part of our program and help support us. He's a certified financial planner. He's also the founder and president of Peak Wealth Management, where you can retire with confidence. And Nick is actually joining us in the locker room for halftime, Greg, and we want to get his interpretation and his experience. He was in Energy Stadium to watch the national championship. Nick, I'm so glad to have you a part of this as we're celebrating a Michigan national championship.
We sure are, Steve. And, after 26 years, there's no way I was going to miss it. We were on a cruise for the Rose Bowl, and it was just poor timing and poor planning on my part. After 26 years, that's a long wait. There's no way we were going to miss this game. In fact, I brought my two boys, my 11th grader and 8th grader, with me. And because if it's going to take 26 years for the next one, they're going to be my age. So I wanted them to experience it.
Yeah, so tell me, what was the best part of being at the national championship?
I mean, where do I start? There's so many fun things that we can talk about. It comes back to my boys. Just so happy to share that experience with them because they're going to remember it for the rest of their life.
And that's great. And by the way, Nick and I ran into each other on the concourse. I mentioned it on the show, but that was pretty cool, Nick, and completely random. And I was wearing my Peak hat. And tell him, did you see me or the hat first?
Oh, I saw the hat. I'm like, what the hell?
What the hell? You didn't know you were global.
And then you went, oh, it's Dooley.
Right.
Peak, you thought you had just a random fan. Peak went global. It is my favorite hat. Nick thought I was making that up. I love it. I've worn it, by the way, to all the big games. It's kind of a good luck charm now, Nick.
He has.
Yeah.
He can't stop wearing it now. He's got to wear it all in 2024.
No, but I'm glad you talked about family because that's really what this is all about is friends and family. And for many of us, I got to see college buddies, right, that had been through great days and tough times with Michigan football and all that stuff. And for many of us, at the Rose Bowl, I brought my daughter and Steve, was there with his son. And for you to experience this with your boys, you'll never forget that. I hope they appreciate what happened and what they got to see and witness with you.
I think they do. I really do. And, over this last few days, I was thinking a lot about the 98 Rose Bowl and going down there with Dave Shannon and Chris Dupre. And, the experience this time with my boys. And then it was like a reunion for my college buddies, pregame. And so that was fantastic.
So do you have a moment that you feel like encapsulates this Michigan football season or the national championship game?
Well, Steve, I was listening to you this morning on TKA, and you were sharing the story about how Sam predicted the play action pass, right?
Yes.
Well, when on the first drive, right, they ran Corum a few times, and then they put in Mullins, and Donovan didn't get in, and he was the third running back.
Correct.
And when Edwards went in, I told my boys, "Hey, Donovan's in," and then bang, 40 yards. And then it happened again. I said, I called it again. Donovan's in, and then he hit it again. And it just, I feel like with Edwards this year, were just waiting and waiting and waiting, and the expectations were so high after the end of last year, and to start the national championship game like that was just so epic. And my voice, I still can't talk from that first touchdown from Edwards. So that to me was something I'll never forget. Hey guys, at the beginning of each home game when James Earl Jones is on the scoreboard doing the intro?
Definitely. It's one of my favorite things that we do. Yeah.
I never want to miss that, right? It's like goosebumps every time. But do you remember he says, "We're proud members of the Big Ten Conference in pursuit of national championships." Have you ever felt for a minute like, are we really in pursuit of national championships?
I feel like that was a kind of a necessary thing to say because we all kind of feel like we're the best, but we all know we're really not right now.
Yeah. If you say you're the leaders and best, you kind of try to incorporate that in the line, but do you believe it's going to happen?
Yeah.
That's a different story.
Do I believe we're sitting here as national? I still hasn't sunk in, Nick.
Since Ohio State, we've had these trips to Indianapolis, followed by Pasadena, followed by going to Houston, and the prices just seem to be going up, and the merchandise keeps having to be replenished. So does our portfolios, because we took a lot of cash out.
Oh my God!
And we have spent so much money.
Help me, Nick.
There are thousands of people just like us that need to find a way to get their accounts back up to where it was before the season. So this is a reminder. If you want to know more, if you want to build your portfolio back up the smart way, the correct way, the right way, give Nick a call at 734-681-7575 or go to peakwm.com. Nick, any final words?
Well, hey, speaking about Edwards here, the best tweet I ever had was the Donovan Edwards. I took a screenshot of him on the cover of the Wall Street Journal. So give us a follow on Twitter, Hopwood1. That would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, and we include Nick. I try to whenever I post on Invictors, our pod. And Nick, it's been awesome. It's been fun. You've been a friend. You've been a partner with us on this, and we can't thank you enough. So if you're out there listening, the over 1,000 listens we've had on the last couple of podcasts, we're growing in numbers and plays. Give Nick a call. If you're just thinking about it, do it now. The karma, it's the right time with all the karma in the football program in this podcast. Do it.
I got two more things that I want to do before we wrap up the program. One, the way the city of Houston looked and everything with the CFP black, gold, and white labels everywhere. Where we were staying was like a movie set. I mean, it's just the entire lobby was like torn down and redecorated to match the CFP logos and stuff. It looked like CFP headquarters. The stairway looked like, each stair was decorated. It was like 30-some stairs.
Yeah, and by the way, this was all custom because what they did was they have these giant pillars in the lobby of the JW Marriott by the Galleria in Houston. And these, obviously, they didn't bring these pillars in, but they fit all the displays to fit perfectly inside the pillars,
right,
on the stairs.
They took the measurements. They took the measurements and figured it all out.
Yeah.
It was a media hotel, okay? But it was like the CEO of a Fortune 500 company.
Yeah.
Just everything was decorated to print, and it's all been stripped down. I mean, our key cards were custom CFP 2024 in Houston labeled cards.
I held on to one. Actually, the media hotel at the Rose Bowl had the same thing. Had a special Rose Bowl design. They were so cool. I kept them. Like I'm not giving this one back.
Yeah,
yeah, they were sweet.
So, and downtown, I mean, I don't know how they did the skyscraper that was, some 40 stories.
Yeah.
with the trophy on it, top notch there. The other thing that I was going to bring up before we closed was there was some success on the NIL front. And I think we could probably talk about the specifics in our next program, but just give the quick, what's it called? Those Who Stay?
Those Who Stay. Yep, it's Those Who Stay from Champion Circle. And I can say this because Champion Circle has announced this, but they actually had a fundraiser in one of the hotels, an information session. Steve, is probably how I should say that, an information session. Over the last week or two, they've raised quite a bit, a few $1 million, partly generous donations, partly fans, and that Those Who Stay campaign, I want to say, Steve, at the time of recording, over $700,000 from fans, basically, for NIL.
Much needed.
Yeah, which is fantastic. And there's been donors who've come in and, match the next 100,000 and that kind of thing. There's clearly momentum. When you're a Michigan, you've got to get to double digits in the millions to fund a football program today if you want to be in the top tier. And I think that's what they're shooting for. So more to come. Well, hopefully we'll have some more information, some more announcements from Champion Circle and people like Hail Impact to see what has been the impact of this national championship on NIL. Because, by the way, it already started. And as I mentioned here a couple times, this is the time of the year with the transfer portal. By the way, Jake Thaw, the guy who made the great play, in my opinion, the mistake, but then the great heads-up play in the Rose Bowl to prevent a safety, is entered the transfer portal or to put his name in. He just announced. There are other teams that are trying to pick off some of our great players that are returning, like people with eligibility, and I don't know, but there's people who are returning like Mason Graham. You got Colston Loveland, right? Will Johnson. All these guys have eligibility left. They can't go to the pros. But the word is that other teams are trying to woo these guys.
Yeah, they're trying to poach them.
Yeah, why wouldn't they? Because you can. And there's, technically you're not supposed to dangle money, but that's what's happening, and the NCAA is not doing anything about it.
Yes, it is. Yeah. We've already talked about what the NCAA is trying to focus on and what they're not, dealing with at all or completely ignoring. I just got to say before we wrap things up, Ohio State has to share. Ohio State was the only Big Ten team that was in the 14 playoff that won a national championship. They have to share. Through 7 years of the college football playoff, Ohio State was the only team from the Big Ten to actually score a point. And now Michigan has a better winning percentage than the Buckeyes do in the college football playoff. Make room on the mantle. Jim Harbaugh is the only head coach to win 3 straight Big Ten titles. Ohio State has had that many Big Ten titles in a row, one at Lucas Oil, but none by the same head coach 3 years in a row. There's a number of things along that line where Ohio State now has to share with Michigan instead of being the defining Big Ten team.
Or be surpassed. Michigan 3 straight trips to the playoffs, right? Ohio State can't say that. No, yeah, absolutely. It was kind of the SEC plus Ohio, plus Oklahoma a little bit, plus a little Oregon, plus a little Clemson. That was the group, right? And we were not in it.
No. And in fact, Michigan is 2-2.
Yeah.
Now in these playoff games.
Oh, that's right. 2-2. That's right.
They would talk about, they could be 0-3. They could be just like Oklahoma, who's 0-4. No, Michigan is 2-2 now.
Yeah.
And they're a player, and it changes now. The 12-team playoff changes. That means Michigan might have more games.
I know
to play next year.
And Harbaugh, you got to give the guy so much credit for what he's been through, what he's done. I know we're going to talk about, we'll probably learn more about his future soon. I like that he talked about when spring practice is going to be, because I think everyone would like to have him back.
I know. You know what, though? I got to say, if Jim Harbaugh leaves, the new head coach might need more than a few weeks to start the spring practice.
It makes sense on so many levels. Just like, the unnamed student telling me, hey, I want to take a break. Yeah, I heard they get a week off, and they deserve it. What a gauntlet they've been through. But, yeah, so we'll see what happens. But I did love, how all the coverage goes to this game. So they bring in all the analysts, right, including the NFL analysts, to talk about the CFP championship. And I loved how a lot of the analysts, particularly on ESPN, marveled at the pro-style defense and how they roll the safeties and all the schemes they do, because they understand it. And another benefit of watching the All-22 view that we had is how much they signal to each other and talk to each other to change the coverages, to roll the coverages, to shift the responsibilities. It's as complex as any offense. is what they're running, and these pro analysts were marveling that Michigan was doing that, and yeah, it was kind of cool to see. Yeah, it was kind of cool to see.
Greg, it's been cool doing all these podcasts with you. We're not planning on stopping, but what a great way to start a Michigan football season.
No, and speaking of a time capsule, I was thinking about the other day, like I haven't blogged and written that much. I haven't done sights and sounds because we're kind of doing it here, Steve.
Yeah.
And we have all this archived footage of our thoughts, feelings, emotions, what happened to us, what happened off the field from our perspective, kind of chronicled. So if you are a new listener, and we have so many new listeners, go back, maybe listen to some of those things, because it's interesting as heck now knowing what happened. And maybe there's some things we got wrong. Call us out on it. And by the way, we are available now on YouTube. Now it's just the audio, but I know some of you are huge fans of YouTube and you have your subscriber list. Subscribe if that's a preferred way that you get your content. We're on there. If you found us on YouTube, you can find us on any podcast network anywhere. So check us out.
Hey, Greg, in closing, we have to change our clothes because I just want to.
Maybe it's really simple now. I don't know what to say.
I just want to remind our listeners, Michigan is your undisputed national champs. Go Blue, Greg.
Go Blue.